The cabin lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow, the kind meant to convince the body it was nighttime even when the sun was blazing somewhere above the clouds. The low, steady hum of the engines wrapped the aircraft in a constant vibration, a lullaby that had already pulled half the passengers into sleep. Overhead bins were closed, seatbelts fastened, tray tables stowed. It was supposed to be an ordinary flight. In seat 8A, by the window, she slept. Her head rested lightly against the cabin wall, breath slow and even. A hoodie was pulled low, shadowing her face, making her look younger, smaller, easy to overlook. To the people passing down the aisle, she was just another tired traveler escaping into sleep. Nothing about her posture suggested alertness. Nothing about her stillness hinted at training. A flight attendant moved past, checking seatbacks, pausing briefly at 8A. She smiled softly, adjusted a blanket that had slipped, and continued on. No second glance. The aircraft cruised smoothly at altitude. Drinks had been served. Conversations had faded. Somewhere near the back, someone laughed quietly. Up front, behind a reinforced door, the cockpit was calm, until it wasn't. A warning tone sounded. Not loud, not dramatic, just sharp enough to slice through routine. The captain's eyes flicked to the instrument panel. A caution light glowed amber, then another. He exchanged a look with the first officer, professional, measured, but alert. Years of training snapped into place. "Let's run the checklist," the captain said. They did, calmly, methodically. The plane didn't shake. Passengers felt nothing. But something wasn't right, and both pilots knew it. The first officer leaned closer to the display. "If this escalates," he said quietly, "we may need someone with very specific experience." The captain nodded once. Outside the cockpit, the cabin remained unaware. People slept. A child clutched a toy plane. A businessman scrolled through emails. Seat 8A didn't move. Minutes passed. The warning didn't clear. The captain took a breath, reached for the intercom, and made a decision he hadn't expected to make today. The chime rang softly through the cabin. A few passengers stirred. Then the captain's voice came on, steady, controlled, but unmistakably serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are managing a technical situation. There is no immediate danger." That sentence mattered. It was designed to prevent panic. Designed to keep order. Then came the next part. "If there is anyone on board with combat flight training or advanced military aviation experience, please notify a flight attendant immediately." The words rolled through the cabin like a sudden drop in altitude. Eyes opened, heads lifted. People looked around, confused, curious, uneasy. A few nervous laughs fluttered and died quickly. Someone whispered, "Did he just say combat?" No one moved. A retired engineer frowned. A private pilot hesitated, then shook his head. A former flight simulator hobbyist stared at his hands. This wasn't about curiosity or ego. This was real. The aisle stayed empty. In seat 8A, her eyes opened. Not wide, not startled, just open. She didn't move right away. She listened. The engine hum, the airflow, the tone of the captain's voice still echoing in her head. Her breathing changed, not faster, just more deliberate. Awareness replaced sleep like a switch flipping on. Across the aisle, a man glanced at her, then away again. To him, she still looked like a passenger waking up mid-flight. Nothing more. She adjusted slightly, sitting straighter, eyes now focused, not on the cabin, but somewhere beyond it, as if replaying a checklist only she could see. The flight attendant's voice came over the cabin speakers, repeating the request more quietly now, moving down the aisle. "Is there anyone with that experience?" Still no response. A ripple of fear began to grow, not loud, but heavy. The kind that presses into the chest when no one steps forward. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. This time, she reached for her seatbelt. The soft click of it unfastening was almost lost in the noise of the cabin. Almost. But it was the first sound that mattered. The click of the seatbelt drew no attention at first. In a cabin full of shifting bodies and restless movements, it blended in easily. She stood slowly, deliberately, steadying herself against the seat in front of her as the aircraft hummed on. Her movements weren't rushed. They were practiced. A nearby passenger looked up, startled. "Are you?" he began, then stopped, unsure what he was asking. She gave him a brief nod, polite, calm, final, and stepped into the aisle. The flight attendant was halfway down the cabin, her smile fixed a little too tightly, eyes scanning faces that refused to meet hers. Relief flashed across her features when she saw the woman standing. "Ma'am," the attendant said quietly, "did you?" "Yes," she replied. One word. Clear. Grounded. "Combat flight training." The attendant blinked. "You're a pilot." "I was," she said. "Military." There was no drama in it. No emphasis. Just fact. The attendant's professional mask slipped for half a second. Then training took over. "Please come with me." As they moved forward, heads turned. Whispers followed. "Is that her? She doesn't look. Why would she?" She ignored them all. Each step toward the front of the aircraft felt familiar in a way that unsettled her. Narrow space. Confined metal. The faint smell of recycled air. It wasn't fear that stirred in her chest, it was memory. Long nights. Red instrument lights. Voices over headsets that never raised in volume, even when everything went wrong. At the cockpit door, the attendant paused and picked up the interphone. "Captain," she said, keeping her voice level, "we have someone with combat flight training." A brief silence. "Send her in," came the reply. Immediate. No hesitation. The reinforced door opened. Inside, the cockpit was tight, glowing with displays and warning indicators. The captain turned first, eyes sharp, measuring. The first officer followed, curiosity giving way to focus. The captain spoke before introductions. "What's your background?" She didn't waste time. "Former combat pilot. Fixed wing. Multi-engine. Emergency handling under fire and systems failure." The captain nodded once. "We're dealing with a cascading avionics issue. Partial automation loss. Nothing catastrophic yet, but it could become manual only fast," she finished. His eyes flicked up. "Yes." She stepped closer, careful not to touch anything without permission. "What's your primary concern right now?" The first officer answered. "Redundancy. If we lose the secondary flight control computer, you'll still have control," she said, scanning the panel. "But your workload triples." The captain exhaled slowly. Not relief. Recognition. "Can you assist?" he asked. "I won't touch the controls unless you ask," she said. "But I can help you think 3 steps ahead." "That's all I need," he replied. Minutes passed in focused silence broken only by short exchanges. She pointed once. "If that light turns amber again, don't reset it immediately. Let it stabilize." She leaned closer. "You're compensating too early, trust the aircraft." She caught a detail both pilots had mentally flagged but not voiced. "Fuel balance is still good. Don't let the alarms rush you." The cockpit changed. Not because she took command, but because pressure eased. The mental load redistributed. The captain's shoulders lowered a fraction. The first officer's breathing slowed. Outside, the cabin felt the shift before it understood it. Turbulence that never came. Panic that stalled. The plane flew on, steady, obedient. "May I ask," the captain said after a moment, "why you were asleep?" She allowed herself the smallest smile. "Long week. Old habits. Aircraft noise still puts me out." The first officer huffed a quiet laugh, then caught himself. A new chime sounded. One warning cleared. Then another. The captain glanced at her. "Looks like you were the right passenger for seat 8A. She shook her head. "You were already handling it. I just reminded you of that." The captain studied her for a beat longer, then nodded with something close to respect. Outside the cockpit door, the flight attendant waited, listening, heart pounding. Inside, 3 professionals worked in silence, focused, calm, while the aircraft cut cleanly through the sky, carrying hundreds of people who would never fully understand how close uncertainty had come. And how quietly it had been answered. The first sign that the danger had truly passed was not an announcement, but a feeling. The aircraft felt different, lighter somehow, steadier. The faint tension that had crept into the cabin without anyone noticing slowly dissolved. Conversations resumed in whispers. Someone laughed again, this time without forcing it. A child asked for juice. Normal life returned in fragments. Inside the cockpit, the final warning light blinked once, then went dark. The captain leaned back in his seat for the first time in what felt like hours. He didn't smile. He simply closed his eyes for a second longer than necessary and exhaled. "That's it," the first officer said quietly. "We're stable." She watched the instruments with the same focus she'd had since entering the cockpit, waiting for the moment when stability proved it wasn't temporary. When it did, she stepped back slightly, giving space back to the crew. "You're good," she said. She'll take you home. The captain turned toward her fully now. Not as a pilot in command. As a professional acknowledging another. Thank you, he said. 2 words, but they carried weight. You didn't have to step forward. She met his eyes. Yes, she replied softly. I did. The intercom chimed. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain announced, his voice calm and warm now, we'll be landing shortly. Thank you for your patience. He paused, then added, and thank you for your trust. The flight attendant opened the cockpit door. Her face, tense for so long, finally relaxed when she saw the calm inside. We're clear, she asked. We are, the captain nodded. She turned to the woman from seat 8A. Passengers are asking about you. She shook her head gently. They don't need to. The attendant understood immediately. Back in the cabin, she returned to her seat quietly. The same aisle, the same row, but nothing felt the same anymore. Seat 8A welcomed her back. As she buckled in, the man across the aisle leaned toward her. You helped up there, didn't you? She smiled politely. I just listened. He stared at her for a moment, then nodded with a respect that didn't ask questions. The landing was smooth. Applause broke out, not loud at first, then growing. People clapped for the pilots, for the aircraft, for the simple joy of solid ground approaching. Some wiped their eyes without knowing why. She didn't clap. She looked out the window instead, watching the runway lights rush toward them, memories surfacing uninvited, other landings, other runways, other nights when applause didn't exist and silence meant survival. The wheels touched down, solid, certain. As the plane taxied, the captain's final announcement came through. Routine, professional, but before signing off, he added one unscripted line. Today reminded us that courage doesn't always wear a uniform, and sometimes, it sits quietly in seat 8A. Heads turned, eyes searched. She lowered her gaze. At the gate, passengers stood slowly, gathering bags, forming the familiar line. As she stepped into the aisle, people made space without realizing why. No one asked for her name. No one took a photo. They didn't need to. The captain waited near the cockpit door. As she passed, he stopped her with a nod. If you ever want to fly again, he said, the sky hasn't forgotten you. She considered that for a moment. Neither have I, she replied. Outside the aircraft, the terminal buzzed with life, screens flashing, voices echoing, destinations calling. She blended into the crowd easily now, just another traveler moving forward. But behind her, a few people would carry the memory of this flight differently. They would remember the calm voice, the steady presence, the woman who stood up when no one else did. And somewhere deep inside them, a quiet truth would settle. You never really know who's capable of saving the day. Sometimes, they're just sleeping in seat 8A.